Hi, I'm Krista Fleckenstein. I'm an artist, author, and maker, and I love finding ways that I can make my work my own. And one of those ways that I like to do that is through block printing. Block printing on fabric is a really fun, easy, and economical way to get started with putting your designs on fabric, and today I'm going to show you how I do it. So it's really easy to get started with block printing because the materials are really easy to find, and you don't need much. So one of the first things that you need when you're making a block is a rubber carving material. There are many different ones out on the market. I suggest trying different ones to see which one you like best. The other crucial tool is a craft knife and a linoleum tool, which is also called a lino cutter. One of the biggest challenges that I find people have is when they're learning how to block print, they don't know what to carve for their first block. You don't have to be an artist to do block printing. You're a quilter. Think in simple shapes, such as an oval, a rectangle, maybe even a drunkard's path block, a triangle, or even a simple rectangle will do. So I'm going to show you how I carve a block. So first I'm going to take my rubber carving material, and I'm going to just carve a very simple rectangle block today. A really good tool to use is something that you probably already have in your quilting stash, which is a clear acrylic ruler. You can use any sort of straight edge. I'm setting my block onto a cutting mat. You want to make sure that you protect your work surface because you are going to be using the X-Acto knife for the cutting, the craft knife, and that's going to go into the mat itself. You're going to want to set up your ruler, and it's as simple as cutting lines with your knife straight up and down to get a nice clean edge. So you can see that it's a nice, easy material to cut through with the rubber. Sometimes if it gets stuck on the back, you just kind of pull it off. But this would be your printing surface right here on the top. So I have a couple of other rectangles that are already cut here. This one I'm going to use standing alone as a solid block, but I'm going to actually put some lines in to do texture on this block. And for that, I'm going to use my linoleum tool. So the linoleum carver tools are pretty cool. They're inexpensive, and they have multiple blades that come with them. To access the blades, they store right in the handle. You just unscrew it, and the blades go in there. Screw the back on. And then the blades go into this front piece. There's a chuck that you unscrew to loosen the blade, insert the blade in, and tighten. It's very, very simple. Today I'm going to be using a deep V blade, which is something that I really like to use for straight lines. Now to get started, when you're carving a block, you want to take a look at the blade. The angle of the blade should be about 30 degrees to your rubber block. And you want to make sure that those top edges of the knife don't go deep into the block. So you can also see if you practice on a spare piece of block, if you dig in, you're going to just rip your block there. So when I'm carving, I actually like to work on a piece of paper. I have a piece of vellum right here. And that allows me to clean up really easily at the end. When you're carving a block, you'll get these little stray pieces of rubber, and you don't want them to get in the way when you're printing. So when I'm going to print some straight lines, I can either freehand it, or a really easy way to get a straight line is actually to use your straight edge. You can line up your straight edge on your block and use that as a guide to guide your linoleum cutter. And you get a really nice straight line. So I have a couple of blocks that are already made that I'm going to use and show you how you can print on fabric. So when I'm printing, I use water-based screen printing inks. They're my favorite. You can also use a textile ink. You just want to make sure that the ink that you use is specific to fabric. So I also like to use a piece of felt, and I make my own ink pad. Today I'm going to show you how to do that using this mustard ink. It's as simple as putting a dollop of ink onto your ink pad. You'll want to make sure that your felt is about an inch, at least an inch bigger around each side than your block itself. Put a dollop of ink onto the felt and really rub it in with the back of your spoon. And this is just sitting on a paper plate. You can set it on anything that you have. If you don't want to use the paper plate, you can just use a regular plate from home. This just makes a really easy cleanup. So I really rub that ink in. If you look and see, there's no blobs of ink on the top. It has a really smooth surface, just like an ink pad would be that you might purchase at the store. The great thing about being able to make your own ink pad is you can mix any color of ink you want and get any color for your blocks. So I'm going to take my rubber block here. I'm going to set it onto the ink pad, and I'm just going to press it firmly with my fingertips. You want to check and see if you have even coverage. I have some spots that are missing right there, so I'm going to just keep on pressing it in. And you can see here that I have a piece of just basic craft felt underneath because you want to get that ink into the fibers of your fabric. You want a surface that has a little bit of a give to it. You can do that pretty simply just laying down a piece of felt. You can also use like a piece of quilt batting if you'd like as well. It'll just help also kind of grip the fabric and keep it still. So I have my nicely inked block here. I'm going to just set it onto the fabric. And this I'm just eyeballing the design here. And then you're going to press on it with your fingertips. Try to get all the way around the edge. If you have problems with your hands, or you have a really large block to do, you can use this tool that's called a Baron, and you can take it and use that to really get pressure on. And then just peel it back. And here I'm going to use the other block that I carved to do just a basic black line design. You can see that I already have my ink here. Again, I'm just going to rub it into the surface. Give it a nice even coverage. When you're carving lines into your blocks, you don't have to go super deep into the blocks. When you have a design like this where you're just not sure how it's going to print out, it can also be helpful to just do a quick test print on a piece of paper or a spare piece of fabric and see how it prints up. If you're having trouble with your lines, you can always go back and recarve. Again, just give that a good press. And peel it right off. If you get ink on your hands, it's no big deal. Just wipe it off with a towel. So once you are done printing your block, you'll want to heat set it. You let it air dry for anywhere up to 30 minutes. It could be a lot less time than that. So I have some blocks that are already printed, so I'm going to go sew them up at the machine. When I was printing these blocks, I printed them in different colors, and then I'm sewing them into a design for a quilt top. Now normally when I would sew, I would use an ivory colored thread, but I want you to see the stitching today. And there you have it, your quilt design. You can see the quilt up there on the wall is also one that I used using this technique. You can really experiment with colors and have a fun time with it. Now when I'm printing up larger blocks, I like to use a different technique as well, using a foam brayer and a piece of plexiglass. You can also use an enamel tray, a cookie sheet, anything with a smooth surface. What you're going to do is you're going to take ink. Again, just dollop it on here. Get your fabric ready on your print surface. And you're going to take your brayer, you're going to move it back and forth. You're going to have peaks at first. You're going to want to get it nice and smooth. It'll have a nice tacky texture once you're done. This block is mounted to plexiglass, which can be a nice way to keep your hands fairly clean and help you with putting the block onto the fabric itself. Roll it on and give it a good press. You can see that I used this design also on this quilt on 2 different pieces of fabric. And you can see that I printed on different fabrics to give a different effect. I printed on some linen, on some white solids, and then actually what I did was I cut that block in half and seamed them together so that you get kind of a 2-toned look as well. And I also paired it with some leather, and it makes a really fun effect. You can see that the quilt on the back wall is one that I also did using this block. You can see that there are different tones of ink. I did that right on my plexiglass, adding particular shades of blue and green and mixing it right on the plate to get different tones with the same block. It's a fun way to add colors and have similar blocks that have a different look to them as well. And that's how I like to make my own fabric using block printing.